Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's live stream on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and of course on X as well. Today, we're turning a spotlight on innovation, technology, and people reshaping dementia care. As many of you will know, I'm Adam Smith, and I'm delighted to be hosting this special session with two incredible guests who are working at the intersection of tech and care. So today is all about wearables, AI, and dementia. Not just the future of dementia care, of course, but a real part of the present. From real-time data insights to comfort-focused SmartSocks, we'll explore these technologies and how they're being implemented and what they're solving and where they're going next. Joining us today are two people that are leading the way in this. We have Dr. Zeke Steer, who's a co-founder and CEO of Milbotix and a visiting fellow at the Centre for Health and Clinical Research at the University of West of England. With a background in defence engineering, Zeke now leads the development of SmartSocks, a pioneering wearable that many of you who have followed our work before with Alzheimer's Society and some of their innovation work will be aware of. And these are pioneering wearable monitors that monitor agitation and distress through AI and sensor. And we also have the incredible Sarah Daniels, who's a consultant allied health professional and occupational therapist in the UK Dementia Researchers Institute's Care and Technology Centre. And a researcher as well. And Sarah is central to the UK Minder project, which integrates smart homes and wearable devices into everyday care. Hello, both of you. Did I get those introductions right?
Very good.
I did.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here, Adam.
Very much.
Together, they're going to discuss what it really means to implement these tools, from science behind the SmartSocks to real-world challenges of getting wearable tech into homes and clinics as well. And after the live stream, Zeke and Sarah are going to stick around for a little group chat where we'll have the opportunity to take your questions as well, and where I can put some of mine to them. But first, we're going to hear from Sarah's going to give us a presentation first of all. Thank you very much, Sarah. And
Thanks,
shall I share your slides now? Are you okay?
Yes, yeah, by all means, yes. And thanks for the introduction. So as Adam explained, my background is allied healthcare professions and occupational therapy more specifically. And I joined the centre sort of at its inception, really, back in 2019, having had a kind of career in the NHS, was specialising in neurology and neuro rehab. So as an OT, my work's really been focused on how disease and injury impacts somebody's ability to do what they need and want to do. And a lot of that is about understanding at a deep level function, risk, and kind of mitigating for some of those things in order to sort of optimize people's quality of life. So that's kind of how I got involved in the centre. And when I'm, as health and social care lead, my real focus there is the translation of research into kind of real world people's homes. So it's population with people living with dementia themselves, but particularly how our work might integrate with in the ecosystem of kind of health and social care delivery. So that's me. In terms of the centre, so we're part of the Dementia Research Institute, which is made up of, well, now 8 centres, but I think we were the 7th centre, which has sort of been funded from back in a big drive in David Cameron's government, but primarily funded by the Medical Research Institute and Alzheimer's Society and Alzheimer's Research UK. What we're interested in and focused in, unlike some of the other centres, is sort of direct patient experience, patient care. The other centres very much focused on wet science and addressing dementia and cures for dementia. And we're really looking at kind of the real world impact of living with dementia and what the priorities are for people sort of today and tomorrow. So this is in part driven by the Alzheimer's Society, who have asked us to think about the sort of digital transformation and how this could be used to improve the the lives of people with dementia. And the focus here on this slide is understanding that people living with dementia want to be at home for as long as possible, understanding the kind of system pressures of the challenges as people living with dementia kind of teeter on a little bit of a precipice as their disease progresses. And we know that being in hospital is a very correlates with very bad outcomes for a number of reasons. So really, we want to look at how technology can overall improve lives and maintain independence at home, but look at that kind of reducing hospitalization. So that's our sort of focus in the main. And here are some of our participants that have been in our study right from the very beginning. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. In terms of the centre itself, we're across a number of sites. So White City, and I'm sitting in the year-end building at the moment, which is on our White City campus. And we've got a living lab here, which actually features a little bit in discussions later for our feasibility work that we're doing with Zeke. And we've also got a living lab in the sleep centre down in Surrey. So we've got quite a lot of facilities for that kind of early feasibility for new emerging technologies. But really, what I've been focused on is working on our kind of flagship study, if you like, the Minder study. So this is kind of an infrastructure longitudinal observational program which is sponsored, which was really founded down by work in Surrey and Borders Partnership, NHS Trust, and the University of Surrey, and then really sort of pioneered there, if you like, from over 10 years ago. And then with extra funding, thanks to the DRI, we were able to maintain that cohort and continue to grow it, setting up another site here in Northwest London, and continue to kind of build on this kind of platform technology using passive sensors. So that little diagram there shows a mixture of passive sensors that are introduced into the homes of people with dementia. And we have some active sensor, what we call active sensors and medical devices that are also included in this sort of configuration of sensing. And really crucially, this platform, which we call the Minder platform, integrates this kind of multimodal data and then allows a monitoring team to view this information. And through this work, we've been able to develop algorithms that can be sort of validated through the kind of infrastructure of the monitoring team, the support from clinicians and researchers. So this is the kind of structure where over the last 6 years, we've managed to recruit and we have data for over 242 patients or residents, people living at home. And on the whole, we're managing a cohort of about 90 at any given time. So it's quite an established flagship study. And it's kind of through that really that we are able to support the evolution of other technologies. And I wanted to share, so the Minder, if you like, is a sort of combination of the platform itself, the research database behind it, you know, the hardware and the software that's being developed as an output of that, alongside the kind of research delivery, managing the cohort and the clinical sort of escalations and SOPs that are linked with that to maintain sort of safety for those participants. Very much part of this cycle of technology evolution, and that's where, or illustrated here, which kind of more or less mirrors or is attempting to mirror a kind of clinical trials or drug discovery kind of evolution, where you sort of start in the discovery phase, or in this case at the beginning, what's the sort of clinical or care challenge, and what are the kind of possible opportunities and capabilities within technology to address some of those. And then, you know, that sort of moves through, once you've got your kind of early prototypes, into sort of validation phases, and that might remain in the lab. We might talk about that a bit more in a moment, but then gradually moving into real homes, real people, real clinics, other sort of more context-specific situations before moving on further to apply that and then ultimately evaluate that, at scale. So all the way running through that is the human-centered design, and so this kind of iteration of improvement and learning goes on throughout, and you can see that the sort of broad kind of umbrella targets is around what can we do to shift towards using technology to build sort of predictive and proactive models of care, and feeding into decision support tools, kind of enhancing clinical and care decision making. And the other, I suppose, aspect of technology that's really being transformed is this role of kind of behavioural biomarkers. So using technology to pick up other metrics that give information around sort of preclinical markers of disease, signs, sort of tracking disease progression, as well as other kind of insights around the way different subtypes of disease might progress. So kind of phenotyping. So that's the sort of evolution and the if you like the vehicle to support other technologies within this platform. In terms of the sort of core sensing, as I say, we sort of played around with sort of low burden. We're aiming for low burden. We've done a lot of iteration in terms of the types of technologies that we've deployed and refining that. But what we are working towards increasingly is this kind of zero burden or low burden technologies. And what we've got here illustrated are very kind of recognizable sensors, so hardware activity sensors, looking at PIR sensors, door sensors and smart plugs. So we work with commercial partners who are marketing some of these devices already to direct consumers and to other businesses, if you like, or health and social care kind of services. But and the other device that you can see here is the sleep mat. So these have become sort of, if you like, core elements of the Minder study. And the sleep mat is quite specific to the individual, assuming that the individual sleeps in a bed, and not everybody does. They alternate between chairs and beds and so on, and assuming that they sleep on the right side of the bed, or the same side of the bed, should we say. So what we can pick up with the sleep mat, for instance, is very sort of high resolution of respiration rate and heart rate, as well as activity in and out of the bed, which is person specific. What we get from the other sensors is more around the kind of household activity. So we can pick up activity, habits, routine, and get a sense of the overall kind of functioning of the household. And what we're looking for with this kind of information are deviations from what we expect from baseline. And it's these deviations that trigger the next step of further investigation. So we're not assuming that we can diagnose anything from these sort of insights, but what we can do is kind of trigger further kind of triage, if you like. So that's the sort of core elements. But of course, as often comes back, there's kind of limitations where we don't always, if somebody is not sleeping, we won't know where the information is coming from an individual patient or person resident. So there is a role for wearables, and of course wearables are now mainstream, if you like. Your phone almost could be considered a wearable for the amount of people who keep it on their person pretty much, but generally the wearable market's been dominated by watches, and certainly at the beginning of the UK DRI's kind of, if you like, inception, care research and technology, we did explore watches, which I'll share with you some of our insights, and that's a lot of where our learnings come from, because it's very well giving a watch to somebody who's motivated to go to the gym and is really intrigued by their own physiological responses to exercise and diet and so on. But what we're proposing here is giving a piece of jewelry that has very much of sort of personal relevance to people and maybe a gift or an heirloom and so on, a piece of jewelry, to someone with dementia who may well struggle with new devices, unfamiliar devices. And so that the assumption that we can translate what works from a technical perspective or what works for the rest of the community or population into people with dementia is quite a dangerous assumption. And we've learned, at our cost, actually, how challenging this can be. So those headlines there, acceptability, accessibility, safety, efficacy, scalability, and sustainable, they kind of hide a huge layers of complexity. So it's a sort of simplistic kind of themes, if you like, that are considerations when introducing wearables, and also a way to evaluate whether your wearable device should be kind of moved on to the next stage, if you like, to sort of application and evaluation. But let's start with acceptability. So first of all, identifying who your kind of target stakeholder is. So there's, whether your particular device is acceptable to a person with living with dementia is kind of key. But I also think about whether your use case is acceptable to other services. So it depends on your the realm that you're working on, but whether this is going to be acceptable to health and social care providers. So thinking about, or care agencies, if you're assuming that they will be responsible for charging and maintaining and fitting. So thinking about the kind of wider stakeholder group. It's not just the person with dementia, which is key. It's the carer and the kind of wider ecosystem that might be involved in kind of supporting the kind of compliance, if you like, or of wearing a device. I suppose it sort of overlaps. A lot of these themes kind of overlap with each other. So we could kind of go into a lot more discussion, I'm sure, as the session progresses, about acceptability. But this is where the sort of human-centered design bit is really key, and understanding sort of core challenges. Accessibility. So this definitely overlaps with acceptability, but it can cover a number of different elements, particularly for people with cognitive impairment. So something that might appear to be easy to put on, easy to wear, easy to charge, just might not be, depending on who you're working with. And I just be full disclosure here, our first exploration into the world of wearables was right at the beginning of the pandemic, actually. And we'd been working with a group who had a lot of success using Apple Watches in a different context, as pediatric population. Excellent compliance, really very compelling kind of results. And we thought, okay, well, this is an opportunity to move on and trial this in our minder population. We hadn't quite sort of anticipated the challenges of sort of the early lockdown, but so we tried everything in the most challenging way that could have been presented. But we sent watches out to people in our cohort with instructions of what to do and how to wear them and so on, not really thinking through what the experience would be. So very quickly we learnt our first challenge, and there's an example of the kind of active state. So as we sent these watches out, we hadn't really thought through what they would look like on someone's wrist. And this is the just some sort of feedback. This is going way back to early work we were doing, but that kind of jumble of serial numbers and completely unrecognizable was a big deterrent for people. So, and the passive state, not a lot of people were wearing a watch that looked like an Apple Watch at that point. So very quickly we realized this wasn't going to work. And so our design team had come up with some sort of prototype examples of how this might be more acceptable and accessible. And this is an illustration of time plus a kind of target of how long somebody might be encouraged to wear it. So a sort of, that battery, but even that's somewhat confusing because it looks like a charging battery is losing charge, but actually it's a goal towards achieving a goal, achieving a wearing time. So we actually ended up abandoning the Apple Watch study in the end because it was for other reasons as well, which will probably emerge as we go through those themes. But I just wanted to illustrate that even with all of the best intentions and all the skills, it's very easy to make assumptions and go ahead with something and find that it I was trying to avoid using the word fails, but in this case, I think we discontinued this particular angle. But just thinking through then, moving through into the next thing, safety, this overarching theme of safety, this captures a number of elements. So there's the obvious physical safety, and this is a paramount. And there are sort of particular vulnerabilities of this population around skin integrity, and actually, putting a device on anybody creates a risk. So that's key, and your onboarding and SOPs are really risk assessments are really sort of crucial to sort of managing and mitigating that. But I think under the banner of safety, we also need to consider the sort of ethical integrity of what we're proposing, and I think that probably that Apple example is a good one. So we spent an awful lot of effort gathering data from people that might not necessarily immediately perceive a benefit, and we're also asking them to remove jewelry or watches that they that may have a great emotional connection with. So actually just thinking about, is it ethical to expect someone to wear this device? How does it compromise other items that they are expected to wear, like a pendant alarm around the wrist, for instance, around their necks and so on? How many extra sort of implements and devices have they already got to charge and remember to do to sort of maintain is sort of a key element under that safety. And then of course there's the digital safety, so that's a primary concern for a lot of people, obviously, and ensuring that obviously the data protection is crucial, and providing that level of reassurance. And the other part of it is this sort of system reliability and sustainability. It sort of leads into these other items, that if you've got a watch or a wearable on somebody and you're purporting to manage or monitor their heart rate and respiration rate, what's your infrastructure to pick up alerts that are outside a range and a threshold? So all of these things should come up in your research ethics, and that's why the research ethics framework is there to manage that. The other part of these themes, efficacy. So what stage are you in this evolutionary cycle? And wearables in the first instance are purporting to measure things, whether they're measuring movement, steps, heart rate, respiration. They're a measurement device. So first and foremost, are they valid and reliable in whatever metric it is that they're purporting to measure, and how does that benchmark against other sort of gold standard devices? The other part of the efficacy kind of comes further down that evolutionary cycle, where what do you suppose that piece of technology is going to enable ultimately? So it's one thing, obviously, being effective at measuring steps, but so what? What are you going to do with that information? Who's going to respond to that? Does measuring steps relate to a reduction in falls? Well, that's a big leap. So be thinking about what the kind of end goal is and the kind of use case on that. And that's really hard, actually, getting the right outcome measure to demonstrate that something is effective. Easier to do the validity and reliability, but then moving into the space of how does it change care is really challenging. We're facing that ourselves at the moment. The other two, and we're getting close to the end here, but the other two sort of really overlap as well. And I guess that the point here is often around cost, and people under cost what's involved here. If you're putting together grants and bids and so on, it's one thing costing in the hardware, but have you costed in the data processing? Have you costed in sort of 24-hour sort of response if that's key to your device? Have you thought about the cost of onboarding, customer support? If you need to kind of keep responding and managing the challenges that people have, and then in terms of the scalability and sustainability, how robust is your kind of PPIE? How generalizable is your work from one population to another population? And what might be acceptable in one socioeconomic or cultural sort of group might be less acceptable to another, and same with different disease populations or subtypes of disease. So I suppose there's another part of that sustainability, which is about what, if you're going to give somebody a device, and this all comes up in the ethics actually. So anyone who's gone through the process of submitting research ethics will have been asked these things. So it's kind of, what do you do at the end? What do you do at the end of your study? Are you just going to remove the devices? How do you manage that if people have become dependent on them or attached to them and so on? And where does this ultimately, where does this device fit into perhaps other technologies that are being sort of developed in the field, the area that you're, how interoperable are they, and so on. There's loads more on, behind those headings, but maybe that'll come up in discussion. So I'll just whiz through then to the last bit here. So wanted to use the opportunity talking to you today and presenting the launch, if you like, of Zero Technologies Network Plus, which is one of, I think, 4 networks that have been funded by EPSRC and NIHR to drive collaborations between industry, health and social care, third sector, and so on, and really sort of promote the kind of collaborations that Zeke and we have at the moment. You can see Milbotix actually down there as to illustrate that. So it's only just launched, and we're trying to sort of build it up from June. So it hasn't quite set up, but early interest. So there's a QR code there for registering your interest. One of my colleagues, Steph Leitz, is the program manager for this particular network, and we're really keen for any of the audience here who would like to kind of be part of this network activity to register on this website and using the QR code. And obviously, finally, just acknowledgements. There's always, in a centre like this, huge number of people all putting in a great deal of endeavour into this work. So there's the Minder participants, obviously, research delivery teams, Steph, who I mentioned about ZTech, Helix Centre. We're really lucky that we've got within the team here designers, human-centred design sort of experts. So Sophie and Matt, who do a lot of the PPIE and the prototyping and iteration around people's experience of technologies. Shlomi and Gaia, who've been really driving the wearables work and using, Shlomi's actually working alongside Zeke to start to pilot the socks that we're going to hear about in a moment in the living lab. And then Gaia's going to support that transition into people's homes on our, in our Minder cohort to pilot this new device and wearables that we're going to hear a bit more about. So thank you very much. I think that was probably way over time, probably. But anyway, hopefully covers some of the ideas and themes.
Not at all. That was brilliant.
Thank
you so much, Sarah. And thank you particularly as well for kind of sharing your story about your use of the Apple Watch, because I think that, and the challenges, because I think so many early career researchers that will be watching this, and some of the people that have contributed on our podcast and blogs and things in the past have talk about technology, but often we kind of skirt over some of the challenges particularly. So I'm really grateful for you talking about that. I remember coming to a DRI talk when the Technology Centre was launched. I don't know if this was your work, because I was interested in you mentioned about what you're actually learning from this, and it's still, I quote this all the time, it's still one of my favorite talks I remember seeing, where you took the data from, I think it was sleep data, which was then stacked on top of each other to show the differences between somebody who lived alone and their routine of somebody who lived alone compared to somebody who lived with somebody else. And that was incredible. Was that your work? Was that?
Well, I mean, I presented that particular use case, and actually it was the PIR sensors, but obviously it's not my work.
No.
But actually, by identifying those two different examples of somebody that lived very well supported with a carer, who the raw data basically showed this incredibly sort of structured, identifiable routine of meal times, bedtime, bathroom. And then the other example, yes, you're right, showed the kind of chaos and disorder, if you like, of somebody living alone with dementia. And that's always received really well received, because it really does convey the opportunity with continuous monitoring and this kind of real-time sensing. So certainly as an OT, you get to go in and assess somebody in a kind of slice of time, but you lose the kind of temporal component of how somebody manages, 24/7, and actually that's a real marker of, general ability to health and well-being. So yeah, thank you.
It was one of the most compelling presentations I've ever seen to persuade me that technology had a role to play, because I don't think anybody could appreciate that, as you say, that chaos of what daily life was like alone compared to it was startling. We'll find that out. We'll find that slide out and show it. We can dig that out. Thank you very much, Sarah. If anybody has any questions for Sarah, do post them in the chat. But I want to bring back Zeke now. Although, have I been pronouncing your name wrong, Zeke? Is it Zeke?
No, it is Zeke.
So it's me pronouncing it wrong. Sorry.
No problem. I get it a lot, as you might expect.
We're going to hear from Zeke now, who obviously is one of the great minds behind one of these innovations now, to talk about maybe a little bit more about that product development, and then we'll bring all that back together in the chat at the end, where we can talk about its implementation and its use and things. So Zeke, over to you, and we'll be back in a little while, and do remember to post your questions.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Sarah. That was a really interesting presentation. So I'm incredibly excited to be here today. I'm going to introduce our product, SmartSocks Discovery, which is a novel alternative to wrist-worn devices for research involving people with dementia. What is SmartSocks Discovery? Well, it's a smart garment that's been developed for use within research. It collects data that's pertinent to understanding health, behavior, stress, movement, gait, and sleep. And it's been designed to overcome many challenges that researchers face when using wrist-worn devices with people with dementia. Challenges such as those that Sarah alluded to in her presentation. Conventional devices can be stigmatizing for people with dementia, and often they face issues with complexity. They have very difficult to use touchscreen interfaces, which don't work for people with cognitive and physical impairments. And as a result, they suffer from poor rates of acceptance and adherence. SmartSocks is designed to overcome a lot of these challenges. The development of the product has been generously funded by Innovate UK and also Alzheimer's Society, who were our first investor. So this is a picture of SmartSocks Discovery. The socks incorporate comfortable knitted sensors, and they collect physical and physiological data from the foot and ankle. So what is our vision with this product? Well, what we want to do is extend the use of wearable devices within dementia research. A lot of dementia research at the moment relies on subjective survey instruments. Data is often inconsistent and unreliable. Wearables provide objective physical and physiological data, which lends itself to a much more robust quantitative analysis. But as Sarah's presentation alluded to, the use of these devices is often quite challenging where people with dementia are involved. And that's why we've developed SmartSocks Discovery, to make researchers' lives easier when collecting this kind of data from people with dementia. A little bit about me. I started my career working as an engineer in the defense sector. I worked in defense for about 10 years, initially developing jamming equipment that was used in places like Iraq and Afghanistan to prevent roadside bombs from detonating. And you can see a picture of that equipment on the slide here. I then moved into AI before there was a big boom. And I was designing algorithms to detect emerging threats in social media data. And lastly, I worked in surveillance, integrating devices that you might find in a James Bond movie into software for UK Special Forces. It was actually during my defence career that my great-grandmother was diagnosed with dementia. She became agitated and aggressive, and eventually she was placed in a care home when my family could no longer cope. Seeing my great-grandmother's condition worsening in this care home is what inspired me to give up my job in defence, to embark on a research project in Bristol, investigating how wearable devices and AI can aid carers to recognise distress in people with dementia. And the objective of this project was to build and to evaluate a technological solution to forewarn carers of agitation so that they could respond sooner with a more effective type of support before behaviour escalated. I was collaborating closely with a care charity on the project, and this allowed me the opportunity to take wearable devices into care homes and to speak with care teams to understand what some of the challenges were that they anticipated in using these devices. And I was incredibly surprised at the negative response to wrist-worn devices in particular. Carers told me that these devices would be irritating for people with dementia, that they would almost certainly be removed. And to evidence this, they related anecdotes about expensive jewellery, watches being taken off by people with dementia in the home, being thrown in the bin, or even flushed down the toilet. Obviously, this wasn't going to work for my research. I needed a device that would be on that person collecting continuous data. And so I started thinking about alternative form factors. I conceived of the idea of using a sock to collect the data, a sock being something that's familiar for the person, habituated, and more likely to remain on them. The response from carers that I spoke with was far more positive, and so the idea of SmartSocks was born. The socks include a removable sensor, and the sensor contains the electronics, the battery, and the radio. The sensor measures physical and physiological processes from the wearer through PPG for measuring pulse rate and pulse rate variability, electrodermal activity for measuring physiological arousal. There's an infrared thermopile so that we can measure peripheral skin temperature, which is useful for research into sleep and stress. And we also have a 6-axis inertial measurement unit in the socks, which is useful for monitoring patterns of activity and gait. The socks are fully machine washable at 30 degrees C and use Wi-Fi to stream data wirelessly to our cloud, where we clean the data and then present it to the user on a web dashboard. The SmartSocks are no ordinary socks. This image shows the electrodermal activity sensor, which has been knitted into the sock using cutting-edge textile technology. And the location of this sensor was chosen in response to research proving that the arch of the foot is as good a location for collecting electrodermal activity data as the preferred locations on the palms and the fingers, only much less intrusive. Oh, jumped ahead, an extra slide there. So this slide shows the discovery dashboard, which is the user interface for the researcher. Users and sensors are grouped into research teams. There are 2 types of user in the system: a primary user, who serves as the administrator, can create new users, install firmware updates, delete data if needed. There's also a secondary user who can collect, view, and download data, but doesn't have any of those admin rights. And it all begs the question, why socks? Well, unfortunately, collecting physiological data from people with dementia is quite difficult, as Sarah's presentation showed. People with dementia can become quite irritated by wrist-worn devices. This often affects behaviour, which is especially problematic when behaviour is an outcome measure of the research. Removal of devices as well can lead to cost increases due to loss and damage to the devices. But more importantly, it means that data can be missing during key times and so isn't available for analysis. I mean, indeed, generally, adherence is difficult with these sorts of devices. Socks are a familiar item of clothing, much more likely to be tolerated by the person, as our research shows, and there are a few risks posed, which simplifies the ethical approvals. We've designed the socks to be as easy to use as possible. They automatically detect when they are being worn, and they start collecting data without any user intervention. There's a status LED on the sensor unit, which provides at-a-glance confirmation that the socks are collecting that data. And if, for whatever reason, the Wi-Fi connectivity is disrupted, then the socks will buffer that data internally and offload it as soon as connectivity is restored. Conventional wearables are usually validated on a younger demographic, so Sarah didn't really talk so much about this, but research shows that data collected with conventional devices often isn't as accurate for older adults. Our validation data set is mainly comprised of data that we've collected from older adults, and we've validated the parameters using gold standard equipment such as an ECG for pulse rate, and so we're very confident that the socks are accurate on older people and on people with dementia. If you have any questions about the accuracy, we have a couple of white papers available on our website. Moving on. So in terms of the product then, I've spoken about SmartSocks Discovery, which is a solution for researchers, but we also have a second product still in development called SmartSocks Comfort. And Comfort is intended for use in care homes. It uses the same hardware platform to collect the data, but we have an AI algorithm that we've developed, which processes the data from the socks in order to detect when the wearer is in a state of emotional distress. We've developed two care-facing applications, one used on a mobile device and another on a web browser. And these applications abstract away all of the complexity in the data to present a three-tier level of need and to alert carers when support is required. Now, I'm mentioning Comfort in this presentation, SmartSocks Comfort, because we're actively pursuing research in care homes at the moment to refine and validate this product. Such as shown on this slide. So we've so far run an independent study with Cranfield University, which found that SmartSocks is more usable than equivalent devices, that it improves well-being in care homes, and that it can accurately detect distress. At the moment, we have an active research project with Brunel University, supported by the University of Exeter, which is evaluating SmartSocks Comfort in 3 care homes in the south of England. And this study is led by Dr. Byron Crease. Because the study is still happening, I can't really report on the results, but I will say that so far they're very, very promising. We have another study that's about to start involving the University of the West of England, and this will evaluate SmartSocks Comfort in a more acute setting, a neuropsychiatric hospital, and involves people with dementia and very complex needs. All of these studies are funded by Innovate UK. We then come on to our partnership with the UK Dementia Research Institute and Imperial College London. So Innovate UK are funding a community evaluation of SmartSocks Discovery, the research product, through this project. Right now, as Sarah said, the socks are being used within a living lab setting, but eventually we're going to roll them out to participants that are living in the community involved in the UK DRI's Minder programme, and see how they work for people that are living more independently at home. We also have another very exciting project with a company called Hug, who are supported by Alzheimer's Society like us. They have developed a therapeutic comforter, which has weighted arms, a beating heart, and a music player. At the moment, they've been using this as an intervention to help calm people down, but they've lacked the ability to really provide that in a targeted way. Through SmartSocks Comfort, we're going to be evaluating the effectiveness of the Hug at alleviating distress by analysing the physiological data pre and post intervention that we collect from the socks. And I think really this is a fantastic opportunity to start to use SmartSocks as a tool to build that evidence base for non-pharmacological interventions like the Hug. That evidence being sadly missing at the present time. Just touching on the pricing, so we are selling SmartSocks Discovery as a kit. The kit comprises 5 pairs of socks, 2 removable sensors, a charger and ancillaries, and a 12-month cloud subscription. The price at launch is £999. Product is available to pre-order from our website now, and we expect to start shipping in the first week of June. just a picture of the socks being used within a research application. And then on to collaborations. So we're very open to working with researchers. We want to work with researchers to build the evidence for the product. And that includes researchers working within the dementia realm and further afield. We're talking to movement scientists, sleep scientists, a lot of interest in the product. We have a strong track record with Innovate UK. So to date, we've been awarded 5 grants worth a combined £1 million. We've been less successful with NIHR, but we are working to refine, shall we say, our proposition for them and build the health economics case. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you're all aware, applying for grants is quite slow and rather uncertain. So the fastest way to get your hands on SmartSocks discovery would be to pre-order a kit, as several customers have already done. So thank you very much for listening. I am excited to be here and hopefully have a very engaging conversation following this presentation.
Thank you very much, Zeke. I didn't actually realize that. So for any researchers who are watching, I can see we've got a question from Dorina, who I know is one of our contributors who's in the US. So we've got people watching who are from all over the world. So your SmartSocks, the SmartSocks discovery, you can, if the data that collects would be of value to your research, you could order this now and this, or you said a kit, was that 999? Is that for, that's not just for one pair of socks? No.
So you get 5 pairs in the kit. You get 2 removable sensors, the idea being that one can be in the sock while the other is on charge, so you can collect data continuously. You also get some ancillaries such as a charger and access to the cloud services behind it as well.
Right. So if that data would be of value to people's research, this sounds, I mean, honestly, I think the idea of collecting this through socks is genius, because I think it's the one place where you kind of have clothing close to your body, right? So there's it's even if people who wear a watch, I know I'm a poor runner with my smartwatch, but even then, a third of my run won't collect the data because I wear it loose on my wrist and it wasn't tight enough to get my pulse and things. So socks are just there all the time, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of older people experience cold feet, so they will want socks. And you can have regular socks, or you can have smart socks.
Hearing you talk made me think, what else do my older people wear all the time? And I was thinking vests. Vests could be another place. But honestly, this is great. I'm going to bring Sarah back now, and we're gonna hi Sarah there.
Hello.
Thank you patiently for waiting. So let's I once again want to give everybody who's watching a chance to put your questions to Zeke and Sarah. So do post those. If you're watching on YouTube, you can post those in the comments, or on X as well, or in LinkedIn. You can post your questions there. We do have one which I think came in around the time when you were talking, Sarah, which asked, let's bring that up here. There we go. Let me show that question, which said, which stage of dementia are your participants in?
Well, we've been running for now 5 years with this particular cohort, and so our participants range from relatively newly diagnosed and therefore those that are mild cognitive impairment and then diagnosed with dementia, all the way through to end stage, really. So we've got the full spectrum, and certainly for projects like this with the SmartSocks, they are defined sort of sub-studies within the overarching kind of research delivery. So it may well be, that we'd be quite selective about who we would initiate a trial with the SmartSocks. So I think we're looking at people that are more mobile and less cognitively impaired and are well supported. So there's a definite way that we can sort of stratify our cohort for different elements of these kind of feasibility pilots.
And I guess because you're testing out various technologies, from the sleep mats to the PIR sensors and things you mentioned earlier, I guess you're trying those with people from the full spectrum, from the very earliest stages through towards those at the very later.
Absolutely. I'm one of the other, I didn't really go into it in this presentation, but we are working on a kind of evolution from Minder called Minder Care, which is working much more closely with NHS and primary care for sort of much closer to sort of more frailty group. So we're looking at how to keep people who are most frail, most vulnerable out of hospital, and they often are unable to do the cognitive assessments that we might have for the rest of the Minder study. So we've kind of had to adjust our protocol to address the needs of a different population. But yeah, so we've got that whole trajectory of lifespan or disease span, if you like.
And I'll ask this question to both of you, but Zeke, maybe you could answer this first. Have you seen the data collected from your devices kind of used in earnest yet? Has it kind of led to some discoveries that were unexpected?
I think we're at the relatively early stages, but we do have active deployments in care homes. We've got the deployment with Imperial College London, and we're really in that stage where we are taking in feedback for the care product to understand how that can best work in the real world. Deploying any kind of technology within a care setting is always going to be challenging, and so it's so important that we do receive that feedback, refine the product before we launch. And in a way, the discovery product is a way that we can do that. So, the researchers will be going out using this product in various different ways. We're all ears. We want to hear how that research is going, and ultimately that will benefit us as well because we can deliver a more compelling product at the end of it.
How about you, Sarah? I mean, obviously, I already mentioned one example which really kind of gave that insight as to the differences between living alone and living with other people. But what have you found so far that's going to be helpful?
So a lot of the work that we have been doing has been around the development of algorithms that can provide kind of an early warning, and certainly the sleep mat has been a huge revelation. And in a way, the period of the pandemic gave us a sort of rather unique opportunity to link a confirmed diagnosis of COVID with a biomarker from physiological marker from the sleep mat. And that's led researchers led one of our clinical research fellows, Magda Kalanko, to pick up an infection risk algorithm. So that flag of an infection brewing from nighttime respiration and heart rate has been really powerful. So we're sort of looking at the validity and reliability of that at the moment, but also that's sort of key to our deployment in the new evolution of Minder Care, which is closer to patient care. So that's got real application in kind of virtual ward infrastructure, in place-based care, to use a few jargony words for the NHS, keeping people at home and getting earlier intervention and treatment. So that's one area that's been
absolutely. You can see anything that's going to kind of even identify, because I've got a stat here that says 60% of care home staff report challenges in identifying early signs of agitation in residents. So between the SOCS and or kind of the onset of a UTI or something like that, which is often identified as something else, you can see how early identification from those algorithms can lead to a different outcome, because you can potentially employ strategies to treat those that we know work. And it's not new it's just getting that data early to employ what we already know is the right intervention to deal with that problem.
Exactly. And I think there'll be a bit of a culture shift in how we respond to these kind of insights and so on. And
I noticed my own Apple Watch now has a weekly big advert for Apple. Apple, if you're watching, we're all happy to take free smartwatches. It now has this kind of thing, this early warning. It measures you sleeping to say, we spot temperature spikes, or if your breathing's low, to tell you if you're going to have a cold coming on potentially, or something, which I thought was good. I think one of the things that comes out from both of your talks is particularly about the potential for complexity. So, Sarah, you made the case for this. Zeke, you've clearly been on this about the absolute importance of patient and public involvement from the very outset to inform design, because you can't get, because of the way you've got ethics and the way you've got funding, it's quite hard to suddenly dynamically shift your study midway through because you realized something needs to change. How are you overcoming those problems? I mean, you've both, it sounds like, Sarah, but you've learned lessons along the way. How do you deal with that?
It's really, really challenging, actually. Yes, you're quite right. The current sort of ethics process of putting amendments in is really slow. So doing as much of the kind of early PPIE iteration before you get into a research cohort. But I mean, there's a case for sort of reviewing the speed. I think there's probably a different conversation to have around research, particularly around technologies, where you actually need to kind of fail fast, if you like. It's much more aligned to what we think of in kind of improvement methodologies, and I think there is a tension there with kind of traditional research governance and emerging technologies.
They've started to do that in drug discovery, haven't they? I can't remember. We did a live stream around Christmas time about motor neuron disease. I can't remember the name. Siddharth Chandran's running it, where they try some drugs, move on quickly. Because these weren't
platform. Yeah, I think it's like platform.
Yeah, they weren't new drugs. Because they were already proven safe. It was a lot easier to do that. And I suppose you employ that same idea on existing technologies or things that couldn't actually hurt people. You're not going to electrocute anybody or have somebody trip up over these things. Ethics needs to get a bit dynamic and adapt. How have you found ethics? Sorry.
It's been really tough. I mean, it does slow things down, and especially when you're developing an AI-based product or even just a research project, you need data to draw upon. That data isn't really available open source, so you have to collect it yourself. But the ethics process is so laborious that it does take you a great deal of time to build the data set in order to develop AI that works.
And I sat on, I can't remember, at a very, very early stage of what I think might have been your study, or it must have been yours, having a whole big discussion about insurance, about whether Crown indemnity insurance covered the people that would be putting the socks on somebody, because that was kind of delivering this is a UK thing, that how insurance works during trials, that whether staff would be covered by Crown indemnity if you were putting a sock on somebody. You would if you were giving somebody a medication, but if you're putting something on, did it cover it? And you're thinking, really, that's so... I didn't really think about that beforehand.
Yeah, you can see why the caution is needed, can't you? But maybe it can be streamlined a little bit. I don't know.
You absolutely can. Right, let's have another look down our... do keep your questions. For anybody who's sending a message about potential collaborations, do reach out. Zeke's email is ZEKE, Zeke at Milbotix.com. I'll quickly post that in the chat there for you while we're... so anybody who's looking to collaborate, do reach out. That's Zeke's email address there in the chat. So I'm looking particularly at Alan and E1231 and some of the other people. Let's take another question here, which is, let's have a see. Sharon asks, thank you for your presentation. They're very insightful. As someone who is currently involved within this realm of research, how do you get through somebody who's skeptical about the use of AI? I can take that further, actually, and then say about technology as a whole, about AI, particularly technology. How have you approached this, Sarah?
It's a really good question, and I think it often comes up around people's acceptability, particularly within this population. I think it's fair to say that we're sort of designing technologies for the future, for our generation, not making some assumptions on your age, but in terms of actually consenting and enrolling on our current studies, we see these perspectives and attitudes, and the skepticism, you're right, comes from not only the participants themselves, but colleagues, and there's a fear that these kind of technologies are a kind of means of reducing the face-to-face care. And I guess the comeback to that that I try and kind of level is that, you know, we're not talking about what the technology itself does. We're talking very much about what the technology enables us as healthcare providers, as individuals, to do. And I think the other discussion that comes up around this is the kind of pervasiveness of smartphones, and you know, we're using AI all the time. It's very much mainstream, and when you start to highlight how it currently encompasses our everyday life, then you get perhaps a little bit more in understanding. But you're right, there are people that are always going to be skeptics, and our work in terms of the PPIE bit and the E bit is looking at a general education about what AI is and how it works, and the difference between sort of algorithms that are maybe just sort of triggering thresholds or enabling us to see more, to do more with the data than you possibly could on an individual level, versus the sort of the machine learning that's much more sort of less constrained, I should say.
And you can see how this is embedded, that both of you very much have your eyes wide open and being aware of those challenges. From Sarah, you mentioned specifically about the idea that these were as passive as possible, that these didn't require. And even, I mean, I would never have thought about asking somebody to wear a different watch or a ring, or that would mean disregarding their old one. And the issue, I wouldn't have thought of that. And Zeke, obviously your idea of socks, again, something that everybody wears. So I think clearly having design at the heart of heart of that. In fact, it was one of my questions was here about I can't quite find it now, about how do you ensure that innovation in dementia tech is guided by the needs of people, and that they'll use it, not just focusing on the capabilities.
Yeah, and I think you will see a much better response from people involved in the research if they see a benefit of that technology to them. It's all about couching it in the right terms. If it's all about your research objectives, then you may find that people aren't that willing to help. But if you provide a benefit to them, they're likely to be much more engaged. And actually that will come through in the research as well.
Absolutely. Let's have a look. We had another question here from Faisal, who asked, what are the main points for this coming to market, especially with the AI data privacy regulations being updated from last year? I guess that is probably coming to market. It sounds like a question for you, Zeke. You've gone through that.
Yeah, so I mean, at the moment we comply with GDPR. All of the data is hosted in the UK. We've gone through and penetration tested the system, so we can be sure that there aren't any obvious means by which a malign actor could obtain the data, and everything's fully secure. If we then start looking at AI, the regulation is still very much in flux. If you combine AI and medical device, which we aren't currently, but we are working towards that, then the level of complexity and uncertainty just mushrooms. So I think there's going to be a lot of change over the next 5 to 10 years, and a lot more regulatory oversight of solutions like ours that are delivering benefits within health and social care.
Are a lot of the companies you work with, Sarah, kind of new startup companies? Do they come to you? I mean, is the DRI open to that? Can people who develop new products and services come and approach you and to talk about testing and evaluation and utilization?
I mean, absolutely. That's the foundation of the relationship we have with Milbotix. That's exactly how that started. I mean, our commercial partnerships that are long-standing and established they have an established business model, and they do a lot of sort of business to consumer marketing. So it's more of a kind of development for them to be working with us as an academic institution. But yeah, so they're a kind of core our core. So Withings is one, and House is another provider, but they're off-the-shelf devices. You can buy them as a private individual. Get them. I actually bought a set from House for my mother. I've got Withings devices at home that I use for myself. But yeah, so it's another leap, taking those consumer devices into one, a research context, but then also doing the work around a sort of institutional use. So introducing them into sort of health and social care delivery is a whole nother challenge. I want to comment about the regulation. Of course, the time that it takes is a cost. So what we don't factor in when we're preparing things, whether it's investors or research monies and so on, that the time that getting through these various sort of governance hurdles and milestones all comes at a cost. And I guess the risks are that you run out of money for a research project, or your business goes bust because you can't maintain it. So there are big risks there.
And I've come across companies like that where are so adverse at the idea of taking it down to being a medical device route because it adds that extra level of complexity, but kind of would benefit from it if it had, because then of course they'd have the evidence that would help sell it. I don't know if you've had that. Is yours a medical device, Zeke?
Not yet, no. We are working towards it, but as you say, it's incredibly expensive to develop a medical device. You're going to need to raise investment. Generally, investors want to see some evidence of commercial traction in the marketplace before they give you a lot of money to go and develop something. A medical device isn't really compatible with that. With medical device, you go through, you build this thing, you then introduce it into a population of people to validate the device, and all of that requires big money. And an investor really wants to see, is somebody going to buy this if I give you 10K today, and then they'll help fund that journey. So you often find that you have to fall back on a wellness device first in order to prove that there is a real need for the product, that people will buy it, before you then develop that very expensive medical version.
I'm conscious of time, but our audience is sticking with us. Nobody's disappeared just yet. So, but I have so many questions that I haven't gotten through. We can post questions if you can. I'm going to go through some of these questions, but I need the answers to be quick fire.
Okay,
if you can do that. So I'm going to come to let's do Zeke's questions first of all. Are you ready? You mentioned AI detecting emotional distress. How do you ensure those alerts are not only accurate but actionable for carers and clinicians in real time?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So the algorithm that we've developed establishes an individual baseline for the wearer, a physiological baseline, and then looks for changes from that baseline in order to generate an alert. Even though the AI is individualized, we still recognize that there could be false positives. And so we've implemented a feature within the neural network that provides the classification, whereby the care team can tweak the sensitivity of those alerts. So if they're getting too many alerts, they can tone down the sensitivity so that they get fewer alerts. As I said before, the challenge with these sorts of systems is always in the data. Do you have enough data to be able to validate that, to prove that it's working reliably for people who may have a range of different dementias? There are so many different variables involved. It's very, very difficult. You need a big study. And so while we've collected some data, we've shown that the AI works reasonably well. We still have a lot more data collection to do and proof points to prove.
Okay, thank you very much. And from a commercial perspective, what would help other health tech startups break through their barriers between research, product development, and real world development? What would have helped you that you didn't have kind of, I guess, a couple of years ago now? Quick, remember short answers.
My advice would be to incubate that innovation in a research environment for as long as possible before you start that commercialization journey, because it becomes so much more difficult when you've left the confines of university to build the evidence that you need ultimately to raise investment to then create the product. So incubate for as long as possible.
And universities, we had Sam Moxon on the podcast a little while ago with us, a live stream on our YouTube channel. If you go back and look, talking about the journey from being a spin out company from a university. Because you weren't a spin out from a university, or were you?
We are,
work?
yeah, we're a spin-out. Yeah.
And you're looking to collaborate. What makes an ideal research or clinical partner at this stage that you're at now?
Oh, it's a good question. I think at this stage we're looking at various different applications of the socks for people with dementia, but other relevant disorders, conditions. So I think we would be open to working with anybody really, as long as it's aligned with our product roadmap, and that really takes us into care that's delivered in the community. So we see SmartSocks as becoming a device that can help monitor individuals, help them live independently for longer, help prevent falls by analysing gait and movement. They're all areas that we're really interested in and actively.
And not just in the UK either, overseas as well, I assume?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we haven't had a lot of contact with US institutions, but we've had some interest in Canada, a bit of interest in Australia. We would love to, take the socks overseas and collect that data.
Great. So that's collaborations. And if you don't want to collaborate, you can simply buy the socks for £999 for 5 pairs with 2 sets and chargers and everything, and then get the access to the dashboard and the data to use in your research. How great is that? Sarah, your turn for your questions, and then we've got some generic ones for both of you. You mentioned that your current dashboards and interfaces can confuse users with dementia. What design principles or co-design strategies have proved particularly effective in your work?
Working with individuals themselves, prototyping, working with designers who are skilled in developing resources like this, and being able to be sort of nimble and iterate in response to feedback.
That makes absolute sense. And what's the most surprising learning about how people with dementia actually use the wearable tech compared to how you expected them to?
Surprising. Well, onboarding really important, but even with onboarding, retaining that information. So we deployed the Withings watches, which have a little clip-on charger, and couldn't quite understand the irregularity of the sensor feed we were getting, only to discover when we did a visit that he was wearing the watch with the charger still attached and the flex wrapped around his hand, and we did not expect that. And that watch does actually look like a watch. So, there's big assumptions that we make, and we're learning all the time, however skilled and experienced and we are.
But I was looking back through my notes. Back in 2018, we had Emma Harding and Nick Firth on the podcast talking about their use of Amazon Echo devices around the home as a kind of way. And I kind of thought this was great because I recently gave one to an elder relative who'd had a fall and spent quite some time on the floor, and I kind of went, oh no, that was awful. I was thinking, oh wait, if they had an Echo, you could have shouted to phone somebody. So I put one in, and it's just sat there, and they don't know how it works, but they know if they fall over, they can shout. But I remember the key thing about them remembering the name of it. And I remember talking with Nick Firth on that study they talked about, is nobody could ever remember that it was the name of, if I say it, my device is going to go off, but it was
that name.
But then they discovered there was the option to call it computer, and people would remember computer, so they could say computer, do that, and learning. Sorry, anyway, back to the questions. How do you measure success for wearables in a real world kind of care setting? I mean,
is that to both of us? Well, I think first and foremost, if people wear it, then that's success, or at least you're a long way towards success. If they don't wear it, you haven't got a wearable. So actually, that kind of human factors part is really key. That would be the first thing. Maybe Zeke, you've got some other.
No, same as you, Sarah. I was thinking tolerability. Is the device kept on? I suppose any other benefits would depend on the kind of research that you're performing and whether you collect the data that you need for that.
And that list of themes that I put down, that would be in a way an evaluation framework that you could work through and establish specific objectives around those themes.
I think your talk was great in so much as I think that could quite easily be turned into a 101 guide for any PhD student that's about to embark on some kind of technology-based wearables assessment research. And we've had a few people in the comments talk about this is exactly their wheelhouse. This is what they're doing right now. And so you've been through that pain and learned. If you haven't published a paper yet and you're learning from, not from an individual device, but from the sector, that is a paper I think is needed. You not that you haven't got enough to do, Sarah. I'm sure.
I think there is one paper that does reveal some of that early work around the watch, a participatory design paper. It goes back a few years now, so I can't remember how it's titled, but I think we did share some of our insights from our Apple Watch experience.
So I'm going to wrap up with two kind of future-facing questions that I'm going to put to both of you. So what role do you see predictive AI and technology in personalized care over the next 5 to 10 years? How is this going to develop? And if you could build your dream tech tool for dementia care, regardless of cost or infrastructure, or what would that look like? I'm going to go to Zeke first, because Sarah, I'm going to give you time to think about it.
Thank you.
Well, we know the healthcare sector. We know health and social care are under a huge amount of financial pressure. That financial pressure is only going to increase as the population ages, as more and more demand is placed on those services. So I think a lot of the use of AI is going to be directed towards driving down costs. It may not be necessarily the really exciting stuff, maybe more along the lines of how do we schedule staff so that we can reduce staffing levels and only have staff in place when they're actually needed. Yeah, I think it's going to be very much cost driven. And actually, whenever you pitch a product to the NHS, it might have amazing evidence behind it, but if they don't see that it's going to reduce costs, then they're probably going to step over it. So it may be the case that only innovations that can evidence that will end up getting deployed in.
And it's bringing that back to cost, because if you can show that it's going to kind of, I don't know, reduce A&E visits, or if it's going to help with delayed discharges, because you can put monitoring so you can discharge people into their own homes where you couldn't before, or I don't know, deal with continence care, because we know that incontinence is one of the big drivers that leads to moving into care homes, for example. Anything you can do that you can bring it back to costs or time saving, I think makes a big difference, doesn't it? So that's the area there. And what about your dream tool in the future? Is there something your socks can't do right now that you really wish they could, but the technology just doesn't exist?
That's a good question. I mean, there are so many different applications. If you can get somebody who might not necessarily receive a wrist-worn device very well to engage with a wearable device, yeah, infinite opportunities. As I said, our focus is on the community going forward. And so we're going to be building in features like GPS tracking, pressure sensors, so that we can analyze the person's balance and how that changes over time. And we have a project with the University of Surrey in that vein. Cellular comms. So there's a big problem in actually taking a piece of technology, deploying it in somebody's home when they may not have reliable Wi-Fi access. They may not be comfortable provisioning the device to talk to the Wi-Fi network. Can it just work out of the box, plug and play? That's really where we want to be, simplifying everything down.
You can see things like, obviously, people with diabetes have foot problems, don't they? And they can be a great source of infection from podiatrists. I remember part of my background is working on MRSA and hospital-associated, healthcare-associated infections, and foot cuts and things like that were places. You could see how being able to monitor wounds and skin and things like that could really help. And sports people, are sports people using these too?
Not yet. Funnily enough, we were contacted by the US Air Force, though, who needed a wearable for use within their flight simulators.
Wow.
So there may be some, curveball applications.
And that's one of the great things about Innovate UK as well, isn't it? That they really will encourage you to explore all those different markets. As much as we're really interested in dementia, that there's so much potential for that. Thank you, Steve. Sarah, you've had loads of time to think, so your answer is going to be amazing.
I've got loads to say now. So I think this answer could be quite broad and depend on kind of what stage of disease you are, or actually just healthy aging as well. And I was thinking particularly around optimizing performance. So the use of AI and ChatGPT and so on to kind of enhance, cognitive function, and I mean in a sort of enhancing what you're already doing, as opposed to going down that track of, can I maintain my cognitive function? I'm thinking particularly of smart glasses. I mean, the revolution that's going on with wearables in terms of glasses, and having that as a device that could be used quite early on to support a slightly ailing memory and cognitive function. Then moving on to sort of closer to sort of where the space we're currently at is using these kind of measurements to improve self-management. So that's always been a kind of objective of population health, is how activated, if you like, can we get our population to self-manage their health and condition and be kind of proactive about responding to that, and then keep going on to the next sort of element, which is again supporting the kind of infrastructure around care, and can we make that more efficient by sort of ecologically valid measurement, and then redesigning the response to that in terms of pathways and health and social care delivery, which is kind of getting closer to what Zeke was referring to. So I was just sort of, you gave me a minute and I sort of went going through an arc of how AI and technologies could and will be in the next 5 years kind of really an intrinsic part of how we function, I think.
And is it bringing that data together as well? Because I know from the work in another space in biomarkers right now, obviously we can collect blood samples that give a very accurate diagnosis of amyloid plaque levels in the brain, but what the focus is gradually shifting towards is combining that data with digital cognitive data, with gait analysis or eye tracking or whatever it is bringing all those things together to produce a more holistic picture. And that's where I guess machine learning and different AI tools can really bring some of that together, to your point about prevention.
Absolutely.
That is, I'm afraid, all we have time for today. But I'm gonna bring us all together in a slightly different screen view now, so that I can flash up on the bottom of the screen once more to bring up Zeke's. There we go. That's that QR code over there. There. If you want to know more about Milbotix and their SmartSocks, scan that QR code now, and that'll take you straight off to their website. I'm also going to paste into the chat very briefly a link to the contact us page on their website. So if you want to know more about SmartSocks, want to reach out with Zeke about a collaboration, want to buy some of these socks to use in your own research, or to put on your I mean, I guess consumers can buy these too. If you're just at home right now and you'd really like to know, because I'm bad at this. Any smart wearable device that gives me more data about myself, I kind of like it. I'm one of those techie nerds. Can people just buy socks to wear themselves to collect data to see what it tells them? You can.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so if you just really like some cool smart socks to wear, but that's not the point. The point is that this gives you data that can really help people living with dementia and care in future. So do reach out to Zeke or get your orders in now. And of course, here's Sarah's QR code as well, which I'm going to pop up on the screen too. So if you'd like to know more about the Minder study, or if you'd like to know more about the UK Dementia Research Institute's Care and Technology Centre and their work, or look at how it could evaluate something you're working on right now, or if you're looking for a job in this area. We didn't get a chance to talk about Sarah's incredible journey from being an occupational therapist to working in tech research, which I will get you back on the podcast, Sarah, to specifically talk about journeys, because I think anything we can do that encourages more young people or frontline care staff to think about research as a career option is also really great too. So there's the QR code there if you'd like to know more about the Minder study, and I will also put that in the chat as well. But that's enough from us today. Thank you very much. If you've been inspired by this, do reach out to our guests. And if you'd like to know more, we've got lots of great content on the Dementia Researcher website. We've got podcasts and live streams and blogs and all kinds of content that talks to this topic. Given we're talking about technology today, I did one last thing, which I'll finish up on, which is we've trained an AI algorithm specifically just on content from the Dementia Researcher website. So this has had access to over 500 blog and podcast transcripts, to live stream transcripts, and it's only trained on those things, not from the internet. And I asked it, what were 10 top tips for researchers and innovators in dementia tech? Let's see if it's done a good job. Let's test out Zeke and Sarah, if you would agree. So number one, it says start with the need, not with the solution. Co-design with end users in mind. Number two, prototype early. Even rough demos help refine usability. Number three, prioritize comfort and wearability. If it's not wearable, it's not usable. Number four, design for unpredictability. Real world settings are messy. Number five, think about who charges it, not just who wears it. Build for carers too. Number six was make data actionable. Insight is only useful if someone knows what to do with it. And number seven was keep ethics central, be transparent about what is being monitored. Number eight was consider digital literacy gaps. Tech must be easy, not intimidating. Number nine was invest in the wraparound systems. Good tech fails without proper support. And number 10 was make impact in ways that matter to people. Comfort, calm, connection. I think our AI did pretty well there. I think that's
very good. See, it's the future.
It is, isn't it? Can't beat that.
So thank you very much again to the brilliant Dr. Zeke Steer from Milbotix and the incredible Sarah Daniels from the UK Dementia Research Institute. I'm Adam Smith, and you've been watching the Dementia Researcher live stream today, which is on dementiaresearcher.nihr.ac.uk. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.